Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Hayawam tawab la atham za achikam yawam al rachagadal Charlotte, which is good day. This is your buddy Yawam from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam kaya hamalakat hashemayim kwara, repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call layim la la b'naw Yahweh, bahasham Yahweh shai, bahasham racha hakodash. Wamashana laza kolim nawa, wamalakim sharuchagadal, which is our praises to our Father Yahweh, which means he exists. Bahasham, in the name Yahweh Shai, delivers in double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. This is a picture, an illustration of a Jake with a haircut. All right, and ultimately, a lot of haircuts and traditions that Jake subscribes to in captivity, goes back to the ways of the heathen. So just in this lesson, I just wanted to, illustrate that point in the spirit. I don't want to zaza banayapa, Lord's will. This is a beautiful edification through the spirit. So it says, figure 46, because in like barber school and, when you go to like a barber shop, in America, all right, they have the little pictures. They'll be like, oh, you get a fade, you'll get a taper, you'll get like a Caesar or a low Caesar. And really the Caesar and the low Caesar, everything has a derivation. All right. And ultimately where this derives from, all right, is back to Greek and Rome, you see, but the Egypts and stuff like that, that goes back to Egypt. And what Esau has done is, as it says in Psalms the 64th chapter, he's done his research. He's done a diligent search. His heart is deep. So it says, figure 46, Caesar's haircut. It says the Greeks and Romans cut their hair and shaved their mustache and beards completely off. This was because they were emulating women. Alexander the Greek introduced shaving into Greece. It was the Roman and Greek homosexual. It was the Roman and the Greek homosexuals who started men shaving off their beards. The mentality of the Roman and Greek men was to emulate women right down to the smoothness of their faces. All right. And ultimately, that's pretty much, they showed an illustration of that. And it's a Netflix series called The Making of a So-Called God, Alexander the Greek. Or it says the Great, but, he's known as Alexander the Greek or the Creep, because of the lifestyle that, they chose. But nevertheless, we got illustrations of that, all over America, Babylon the Great. All right, right here. It says Little Caesars. And as you can see, he got a piece of pizza, and of course it got pepperoni on it, the pork pepperoni. But then he has that little toga thing on, and then you can see that he got a completely shaved face and a bald head. And that's pretty much the illustration, or that was like their style, and Jake pretty much subscribes to this. All right, so I want to get a couple precepts, just going into this. All right, so let's get, we'll get Jeremiah chapter 10 and verse 1. And it says, hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Yasharallah. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. It says, for the customs of the people are vain, for one cutteth the tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with an axe. All right. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers that it move not. It says, they are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. All right. And that's ultimately going into, the custom of the so-called Christmas. All right. But nevertheless, going back up to verse 1, it says, hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Yasharallah. We're supposed to hear the word that the Lord is ultimately bringing out, going into the scriptures, you see, because the scriptures is what keeps us whole. It's what keeps us at peace. All right. It says, hear ye the word. All right. When you hear Shammai, this word should go into Shammai. It says Shammai, and Shammai goes into, it says to listen, to obey. Have power to hear. It says to hear with attention or interest. So we should hear with attention and interest, you see, because going into this specifically says a satire on idolatry, all right, in which them doing those things, they're really paying homage to certain deities, so-called deities, all right, the Greeks and the Greeks, the so-called Greeks and the Romans, all right. I say so-called Greeks because essentially, Edom just pretty much subscribed to that land, you see, because they conquered those lands and they took them from Japheth. So they became known as the Greeks. All right. But going back up to the subtitle in the blue letter, it says a satire on idolatry, you see, because it's satire, it's folly, it's it's a mockery on idolatry, you see, because it's useless. All right, because what they did that for was to emulate women. All right, and who that's paying homage to is the idol Ishtar. All right, so that's a vain custom. All right, and also in Egypt, they had specific so-called deities that they was paying homage to when they would do the edge ups and the different stuff to so-called beautify themselves, for lack of better words, or to alter their appearance. All right, but it says, "Thus saith the Lord: Learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them." All right, so we're not supposed to learn the ways of the heathen. All right, because skipping down to verse 3, it says, "For the customs of the people are vain." These are vain customs. All right, to cut a low Caesar. When they was doing it to emulate women. All right, but then you got Jake doing it, subscribing to the ways of the heathen. All right, those customs are vain. All right, and one reason that it goes into vanity is because by Jake shaving off your face, ultimately that creates what they call in this society, what is it? Pseudo folliculitis barbae or something like that, with the razor bumps. And it's very painful. And the reason that Jake gets those things is because we're not supposed to be shaving our face. All right. That's for the heathen. They got that shit. We supposed to subscribe to growing out our beard. All right. Giving off a masculine appearance. All right. Scriptures say that, ultimately we're supposed to, pole our heads. We're not supposed to have long hair like a woman. All right. We're not supposed to shave our face to appear as a woman. All right. We're supposed to give off of that natural appearance as the Lord gave unto us. All right. So let's also get this. Let's get Leviticus chapter 19. We'll get verse 27. All right. And it says, "Ye shall not round the corners." I'll start at verse 26. And it says, "Ye shall not eat anything with the blood." All right. And that's because the life is in the blood, and ultimately those things, the life or the blood is set aside, all right, for atonement and things as such. The blood is supposed to be poured out into the dust, all right, as it mentions in the law. I can't remember specifically what scripture it's in, but pretty much the blood, we're supposed to cook our meat well done. It says, "Ye shall not eat anything with the blood, neither shall ye use enchantment, nor observe times." And all of the heathen, essentially, they use enchantments and they observe times. All right, let's get this word for observe times. It says Ainan. All right, and it says to make appear, produce, bring clouds, to practice soothsaying. So pretty much going into, Esau got like a cloud or a weather machine, and that's pretty much a version of this. Also, in areas like it's Jake over there, in like Western Africa and different parts of Africa, but they go into stuff like that, to where they're pretty much bringing weather and stuff like that, on the left hand side. But we're not supposed to do those things, all right. But right here it says to cloud over, figuratively, to act covertly. All right, practice magic, bring enchanter. It says observer of time. It says soothsayer, a sorcerer. All right, because all of these things go into sorcery. All right, but it says neither shall ye use enchantment nor observe times. It says, "Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard." So we're not supposed to, it says round the corners of your head. When you go to this word for round, is where it has a relation to quap, but it says not quap, and it means to compass. You see, it's related to quap because quap is the word for the sun. Qua goes into the sun on the horizon. Pa goes into speak, so the sun speaks. All right, and it speaks. All right, because it produces heat on that circuit that it goes pursuant to Ecclesiastes 1:5. So this right here has a relation to a circuit. All right, so we're not supposed to make a circuit around our head going into those edge ups or line ups or whatever, whatever Jake call it, the Beijing. All right, we're not supposed to be getting those types of things. All right, we're supposed to pretty much give off that natural appearance. So it says, "Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard." So we're not supposed to get a line up around the beard either. All right, we can trim our beard, or we can trim our hair, but we're not supposed to grow it out long like a woman. So it says, verse 28, it says, "Ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord." So that goes into tattoos. We're not supposed to be getting edge ups and tattoos and stuff like that, which that's heavily pushed in America. All right, you see, Esau, he would get the lineups, the edge ups, and the shaving the face and stuff like that, and getting tattoos. Jake could see that, and Jake is very impressionable. So then Jake started to subscribe to that, But that stuff was never meant for us. All right, what was meant for us is the law, statutes, and commandments. That's what gives us a righteous appearance. All right, Jake is so focused on wickedness. All right, and that's why Jake is heavily into these altered ways of life. All right, that was never meant for us. All right, so I'm gonna get one more, and that'll be it. But this is Ezekiel chapter 44, and we'll get verse 19, and it says, give me a sec. Oh, verse 20. It says, "Neither shall they shave their heads, nor suffer their locks to grow long. They shall only poll their heads." And this is talking about, I'm going to read down. Give me a second. What is going into the priest? It says, "Neither shall they shave their heads, nor suffer their locks to grow long. They shall only poll their heads." All right, and that's essentially, that goes into our customs, to where, we will, when you go into this word for poll, all right, this word for poll, it says kasam, and it says to cut, clip, trim, to shear like a sheep. Sheep, you don't shave them bald, you trim their hair, I believe they do it when it gets hot, so they not sweating and stuff like that, or it might just be to get the wool, but nevertheless, the point is that, pretty much, we trim our hair, we don't shave. All right. And let me see. This is 2 Samuel chapter 14 and verse 25. It says, "But in all Israel there was none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty, for the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him." It says, "And when he polled his head, for it was at every year's end that he polled it, because the hair was heavy on him, therefore he polled it. He weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight." Excuse me. After the king's weight. I'm reading this in the NLT. It says he cut his hair only once a year, and then only because it was so heavy. When he weighed it out, it came to 5 pounds. So he cut his hair. You see, because it was super heavy. All right, and that goes into our customs. We would trim our hair. We wouldn't let it grow out long, like women. Because there's a difference between a man and it's a difference between a woman. All right, and the so-called Greeks, the Romans, all right, and the Egyptians, all right, they was into those altered ways of life, and a lot of times, they would when they did that, they pretty much was paying homage to the idol Ishtar. You see, because the Egyptians, they was into homosexuality. All right, the Greeks and the Romans, they was into homosexuality, and that way of life ultimately pays homage to that specific deity. And we was ultimately created to fear the Lord, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. So just want to go into that. I don't want to zaza by Naipa. Lord's will, that was a beautiful edification of the spirit. Wa don't want to za atam yashka wam tawab. Lord's will, you have a good day. Wa shalom lakam, which is peace to you all. Shalom, shalom.